I can still hear it, you know. Not the noise of the city, not the cars or the sirens or the endless thrum of a million lives stacked on top of each other. I hear the other thing, the thing I went looking for. It's the last sound I ever wanted to hear, and it followed me back. It's whispering to me right now, from the quietest corners of my apartment. It's telling me to tell you what happened. This is a new channel with incredible stories every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Leo, and for 34 years my entire world was made of sound. I was a sound engineer, a damn good one. I didn't just hear things, I saw them. I could walk into a room and see the sound waves bouncing off the walls. I could tell you the precise frequency of a faulty refrigerator coil from 2 rooms away. And I could take the raw, chaotic noise of a film set and weave it into a symphony that made you feel joy, or terror, or heartbreak. Sound was my paint, and the world was my canvas. But the canvas was getting crowded. The city. It was a constant, deafening roar, an assault. Every day was a cacophony of competing noises that scraped against my nerves until they were raw. The screech of the subway wasn't just a screech. It was a blade of pure 7,000 hertz agony. The endless construction outside my window wasn't just a nuisance. It was a low-frequency earthquake that vibrated through my bones, a constant, dull headache I couldn't escape. I started wearing professional-grade earplugs just to buy groceries. I soundproofed my apartment until it felt like a tomb, but I could still feel the city's pulse through the floorboards. I was drowning in noise, and I began to fantasize about the opposite. Not just quiet. I craved a silence so absolute, so profound, that it had a presence. A silence you could listen to. That's what led me to a grainy online listing for 60 acres of untouchable forest in northern Vermont. The pictures showed a dense, almost primeval-looking woodland with a tiny, sturdy cabin in the middle, looking like a forgotten secret. No power lines, no cell service, no roads visible for miles. It was perfect. It was the ark I would build to survive the flood of noise. The price was the first strange thing. It was low. Suspiciously low. I drove up there on a gray autumn afternoon, the city's concrete jungle slowly giving way to rolling hills, and then to thick, imposing forests of pine and maple. The air itself seemed to change, to get heavier, cleaner. I met the owner, a man named Silas, at a rusty gate at the edge of the property. He was a piece of the landscape himself, weathered face, hands like gnarled roots, eyes that seemed to hold the long, slow patience of the trees behind him. He showed me around the cabin. It was solid, built from the very trees it stood among. 1 room, a wood stove, a well pump outside. Spartan, perfect. I couldn't stop grinning. I could already feel the tension in my shoulders beginning to unclench. "I'll take it," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet clearing. Silas just nodded slowly. As we signed the papers on the hood of his ancient pickup truck, I had to ask, "Why so cheap, Silas? A place like this, it's a gold mine for someone like me." He stopped writing, his pen hovering over the paper. He looked up, not at me, but past me, towards the impenetrable wall of trees that bordered the clearing. His gaze was distant, troubled. "The land, it's got its own ways," he said, his voice a low rumble like stones shifting. "It's been quiet for a long time. Too quiet. The last few years, though, nature's gotten restless out here." I must have looked confused, so he continued, his eyes still fixed on the woods. "There are whispers. On the wind, sometimes. When the air is still, you can hear things carried through the trees. I'm a man of logic, of acoustics and frequencies. Whispers on the wind are just the psychoacoustics of air moving through pine needles. The brain's tendency to find patterns, a phenomenon called pareidolia." I smiled politely. "Sounds like local folklore. Adds to the charm." Silas didn't smile back. He just finished signing, folded the papers, and handed me a single, heavy iron key. It felt cold and ancient in my hand. "It ain't folklore," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "It's a remembering. The woods are remembering what they were like before people. And they don't like being listened to." His final words as I got into my car were, Good luck to you. Hope you find the quiet you're looking for." But the way he said it, the deep, somber tone in his voice, it didn't sound like a wish. It sounded like a warning. I drove away feeling a thrill, a sense of adventure. I was the rational man, the scientist of sound, about to conquer the final frontier, absolute silence. I had no idea that I wasn't the conqueror. I was the sacrifice. The silence I was so desperate to find was waiting for me, and it was hungry. The first 48 hours were pure, unadulterated bliss. I'd never experienced anything like it. The silence was a physical thing. It was a weight, a pressure in my ears that was slowly decompressing after a lifetime of auditory assault. I would just sit on the small porch of the cabin for hours, listening. The sounds that did exist were exquisite, magnified by the void around them. The gentle sigh of the wind was a complex orchestra of individual leaves rustling. The snap of a twig under some unseen animal's foot in the distance was a gunshot, a percussive event that made me jump. The frantic drumming of a woodpecker was a solo performance on the world's biggest stage. I set up some of my high-end recording equipment, a pair of ultra-sensitive condenser microphones, and a portable digital recorder. I wanted to capture it, to document this perfect, pristine silence. The initial readings were astounding. The ambient noise floor was lower than anything I had ever measured, even in professional anechoic chambers. It was almost a perfect zero. I felt a sense of triumph. I had found it, the holy grail of quiet. The third night is when things began to change. I was lying in my sleeping bag, watching the fire in the wood stove die down to glowing embers. The silence was deeper now, the nocturnal animals having settled. It was a thick, velvety blackness of sound. And then I heard it. A single, perfect C-sharp. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. It sounded like it was coming from a high-quality synthesizer, a sine wave so pure it could only be electronically generated. I sat bolt upright, my heart instantly hammering against my ribs. It lasted for maybe 3 seconds, then vanished. My logical brain kicked in immediately. An auditory hallucination. My brain, so accustomed to constant input, was creating phantom sounds to fill the void. It's a known phenomenon. I took a deep breath, told myself to relax and lay back down. But I couldn't sleep. I was listening now, actively listening. And the silence felt different. It was no longer peaceful. It felt watchful. The next day, I was chopping wood when it happened again. This time, it was the distinct metallic scrape of a chair leg on a concrete floor. I know that sound intimately. It was the sound of my specific chair in my mixing studio in the city, the one with the one loose wheel. I've heard it 1,000 times. To hear it here, in the middle of a forest, 100 yards from my all-wood cabin, it was impossible. I dropped the axe. I scanned the tree line, my breath held tight in my chest. Nothing. Just the endless, silent trees. I spent the rest of the day trying to debunk it. I checked my gear. Maybe the recorder was malfunctioning, playing back random bits of memory? No, it was off. Maybe a hiker was nearby with a radio? I walked the perimeter of my 60 acres. I found no tracks, no signs of anyone. The silence was absolute. That night, I decided to conduct an experiment. I set up my microphones in the main room of the cabin and put on my best pair of monitoring headphones, the kind that block out all external noise and give you a perfectly clean feed. I was going to catch this. If there was a sound, my equipment would hear it better than I could. For an hour, there was nothing but the low hiss of the recording equipment's own noise floor. And then, I heard it through the headphones, a whisper. It was right in my ear. So close it felt like someone was leaning over my shoulder. It wasn't words, just a sibilant, airy hiss that shaped itself into something that almost sounded like language. My blood went ice cold. I ripped the headphones off. The cabin was utterly silent. There was nothing there. I looked at the levels on my recorder. The meters hadn't budged. Not a single decibel. The sound had been size in the headphones, but it hadn't come through the microphones. It was as if something had broadcasted directly into the electronic signal path. That was the moment my scientific curiosity curdled into genuine, primal fear. This wasn't my brain playing tricks on me. This wasn't a malfunction. Something was happening. What would you have done in my place? Run? Or try to figure it out? Let me know in the comments. I was terrified, but the professional in me, the part that had dedicated his life to understanding sound, was hooked. It was an impossible acoustic event, and I had to know what was causing it. The following week was a descent into a very specific kind of madness, a personal hell designed just for a sound engineer. The phenomenon, whatever it was learning. It started using sounds from my memory. One morning I was making coffee and I heard the faint, cheerful jingle of a specific ice cream truck that used to pass my apartment in the city every day at 3 p.m. Another time I heard the voice of my old college professor, a perfect mimicry of him saying a single phrase from a lecture I'd attended over a decade ago. The signal-to-noise ratio is key. The sounds were never loud. They were always at the very edge of hearing, just enough to make you question your own sanity. They were glitches in reality, audio artifacts that shouldn't exist. I was becoming a ghost in my own life, haunted by the soundtrack of my past. The paranoia set in hard. I stopped sleeping. I would sit awake all night, headphones on, recorder running, just waiting. The silence was no longer an absence of sound. It was the canvas that this thing was painting on. And its art was terrifying. It started to get more creative. It would take a natural sound and twist it. The hoot of an owl would seamlessly morph into the dial tone of a disconnected phone line. The sound of rain on the cabin roof would slowly rearrange itself into what sounded like faint, discordant piano music. It was intelligent. It was playing with me. It knew what sounds meant to me, and it was using them to unnerve me, to dismantle my understanding of the world. I felt like a rat in a maze, and the scientist running the experiment was the silence itself. Have you ever experienced something you just couldn't explain? Something that defied all logic? It's a chilling feeling to have the very foundation of your reality start to crack. The breaking point came one afternoon. I had set up a microphone on a tripod about 50 yards from the cabin, pointed towards a particularly dense patch of woods where the whispers Silas mentioned seemed to be the strongest. I ran a long cable back to the cabin and was monitoring the feed. For hours there was nothing. Then I heard a voice. My voice. It was a perfect recording of me, speaking the exact words I had said to Silas when I bought the property. Sounds like local folklore, adds to the charm. The tone, the inflection, the slight crackle of outdoor air. It was perfect. A perfect echo of a moment in time, but this was no echo. It was a playback. And then I heard another voice, Silas's. It ain't folklore. The recording of his voice whispered back. My heart stopped. It was replaying our conversation. How? It was impossible. There were no recording devices there that day. It wasn't just mimicking sounds anymore. It was accessing my memories, my experiences, and playing them back for me. I ran out of the cabin, screaming into the silent woods. What do you want? Who are you? My voice was swallowed by the oppressive quiet. There was no echo. The sound just vanished, absorbed by the trees. And in the sudden silence that followed my own shouting, a new sound emerged. It came from all around me, a low, guttural vibration that I felt more than heard. It was the sound of the earth itself humming, a deep, resonant frequency that made my teeth ache and the air shimmer. The leaves on the trees began to tremble, but there was no wind. The silence wasn't just a canvas anymore. It was the instrument. It was a living, breathing entity, and I had trespassed into its sanctuary. It wasn't that the woods didn't like being listened to, as Silas had warned. It was that they had their own voice, a voice so ancient and powerful that the introduction of my sounds, my memories, my very presence, was a discordant note in its eons-long symphony. And it was trying to correct me, to erase me. It was trying to tune me to its frequency. I stumbled back to the cabin, my mind reeling. This wasn't a haunting. It was a presence, an intelligence made of pure silence and vibration, one that had existed in these woods long before anything had ears to hear it. It had observed me, studied me through the sounds I made and the sounds I remembered. and it was now communicating in the only language I was guaranteed to understand, the language of sound itself. The final night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in the dark, my most sensitive microphone pointed at the cabin door, my recorder running. I was done trying to debunk it. I just wanted to capture it, to have proof that I wasn't insane. The mimicked sounds stopped. The whispers ceased. All that was left was that deep, terrestrial hum, which grew steadily in intensity. Then, a new sound began. It wasn't from my memory. It was something utterly alien. It was a chittering, clicking sound, layered with a melodic, mournful tone that sounded like whale song and a Gregorian chant all at once. It was complex, structured, and filled with an intelligence that felt vast and terrifyingly non-human. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and I knew whatever happened next would change me forever. If you're on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss stories like this. The sound grew louder, seeming to emanate from the very wood of the cabin walls. It was analyzing me, speaking to me in its native tongue. And in that impossible symphony, I finally understood. I had come seeking silence and absence of things. But there is no such thing as true absence. There is only the presence of something else. This ancient consciousness didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to absorb me. It wanted to add my sounds, my consciousness to its own. It wanted me to become another whisper on the wind. I looked at the little red light on my digital recorder. It was blinking. I had it. I had captured the voice of the silence. That was all the proof I needed. I didn't wait to hear the rest of the song. I grabbed my keys and my recorder, and I ran. I didn't pack. I left thousands of dollars of audio equipment behind. I just ran. I burst out of the cabin and sprinted to my car, the alien music seeming to crescendo behind me, the very air vibrating with its power. I fumbled with the key, my hands shaking uncontrollably. As the engine roared to life, a glorious, beautiful mechanical noise, the other sounds stopped instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Absolute, profound silence rushed back in. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was waiting. I peeled out of there, spraying gravel, not looking back. I drove for hours, not stopping until the sun was up and I could see the hazy, polluted skyline of a city on the horizon. I have never been so happy to hear the sound of traffic in my life. The noise was a blanket, a shield. It was safety. I'm back in my apartment now, the one I soundproofed to escape the noise. Now, I leave the windows open. I need the sirens, the horns, the hum of the city. They keep the other thing at bay. Most of the time. But sometimes, in the dead of night, in the moments between a passing ambulance and a distant car alarm, there's a pocket of quiet. And in that quiet, I can hear it. The faint C-sharp sine wave. The memory of a whisper. I have the recording. I've listened to it once. The sound it captured, it's not on any known frequency. It breaks the laws of acoustics. I'm afraid to listen to it again. I'm afraid of what it might be saying. I went looking for silence, and I found a voice that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I escaped the woods, but I don't think I'll ever truly be alone in the quiet again. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments. I read them all.